And I always talk about the Creator as the most vulnerable being who exists. That's my understanding of who God is. And part of that's part of love is vulnerability, And so if we are vulnerable with people, if we're authentic, that's part of really who God is. And that's probably the most spiritual we can be, is just to be human beings who are open and who are vulnerable.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. I don't often analyze the way that I think, the values that I hold, and the worldview that I see with. But when I sit down with people like Randy and Edith Woodley, I can't help but do it. I can't help but see what I have inherited from a dualistic worldview that has been worked out over thousands of years since Plato. And I can't help but see that some people live harmoniously with a different worldview. What am I holding that is causing harm? What am I holding that is good and faithful to how the Creator has ordered the world? These are questions we should all be wrestling with. And you can start this wrestling as you listen to this conversation. Randy and Edith Woodley have radically different perspectives on what it means to live a fulfilling life. As Native American authors and educators, they challenge the Western notion of pursuing individual happiness, arguing that true well-being comes from living in harmony with our broader community and the natural world. In this conversation, Randy and Edith share their personal stories of overcoming intergenerational trauma and discovering the wisdom of Indigenous worldviews. They contrast the European dualism that separates the spiritual and material realms with a holistic understanding that sees all of creation as interconnected. Digging into concepts like hospitality, humor, and the importance of story, Randy and Edith paint a vision for how we can all learn to live more authentically and in right relationship, not just with each other, but with the earth itself. Their insights challenge us to unravel the lies that we've been told and we've been living with, and to rebuild our lives on a foundation of harmony and respect and generosity. This is a conversation that can open up a different way to see the world. So get ready to have your assumptions challenged and your heart opened as we explore a path to greater well-being for ourselves, our communities, and our planet. Here is my conversation with Randy and Edith Woodley. Randy, Edith, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd love to start where you start in your book as an introduction. Before I cracked open your book, I had this same conversation with my wife. We were sitting on the couch and I was like, I think that America might have gotten it wrong when they said, put in the Constitution, the pursuit of happiness, because we don't know what happiness is. And you contrast the difference between our understanding of happiness and well-being, and what well-being is. Can you dig into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So it seems kind of like a fine line, right? But if you think about American, and because we are probably the most individualistic society who's ever been on the planet, right? It's all about us, right? Our happiness, what's making our heart feel good and what's making us well. But what's missing in that equation is the fact that if the rest of our community, the rest of the earth, the rest of the creatures around us are not also happy or are in right relationship, then eventually that's going to ruin our happiness. And so even though it might seem a bit selfish, the idea for Americans is that, if I am just interested in myself, eventually I'm not going to be happy, right? So well-being is really what we call well-being, or being in harmony with the community of creation, is really about like looking at the whole picture, looking at our communities, looking at our the earth and the wildlife around us and the flora and the fauna and everything else, and saying, what is going to bring the ultimate long range happiness for our society, for our children, for our family, etc. So yeah, I really see a difference, and that's why we wanted to, from the very beginning, just say, this isn't a book about, like how to make you happy. It's a book about how to make us all happy, right? Or well-being.
So then what do you see as people who have started to live different values than the majority culture in the West and the United States, the European American culture that we have now? What do you see that people are crying out for? What do you see as the broken relationships that aren't right living at the moment? Where have we gone wrong, and that people are crying out for something different?
The way I see it is that when someone is not connected with the earth, with nature, there's, like Randy was saying, in how it's so individualistic. And so they're so concentrated. They're like, okay, got to go to work, got to make money, got to do this, got to make, provide for my family. They don't realize that they're just kind of like on this one-way road, and really they're really not that happy, but they continue to do it anyway because they got to provide for their family, right? They got to pay their bills, they got to pay their mortgage. And so being connected to nature, to the earth, to the animals and stuff around you, and just acknowledging that connection that we were made to be connected with will make us feel lighter and happier. I know from my own experience, when I feel kind of I have to go and I go outside and I walk and I go sit. So yeah, I'm connecting back with nature, and then I come back and I'm feeling better.
We're individualistic, we're self-centered. We're not connected to the earth, to nature, to creation, where, I'm exactly like you, Edith. Like if I'm feeling yucky, if I need something, I have to be out in nature. I have to go on a walk. I live for going on walks in the woods and being among the tall trees. I mean, growing up in Western Washington, I mean, we had it all over, and that's my place. I need to be out there. So as you went, and what made you get into this place of having your own place, your own farm, and to be able to connect what is happening at your place that revitalizes our relationship then to the earth and to the place around us?
Yeah. Well, what happened to us is, what actually happens to everyone, which is what you just described. It's like, well, when we're out in creation, which is made for us to enjoy and for the Creator's pleasure, we connect also with this sense of spirituality or Creator. And so, it's a very natural thing. Well, but we've become, and I'm sure we'll get into talking about worldviews and dualism and all that, but we've become so isolated from this natural place that we're supposed to be, that, it seems like we have to have permission to love the earth and to love creation and all of that. Now we can love our pets, that's okay.
Yeah.
But we can't love, the ladybugs out there, and the plants and the trees and, all the, 40 billion, microbes in one healthy cup of soil out there, so we're talking about, that sort of a thing should be natural, and it wasn't. Well, we were for many, many years in serving among our native people, right, in different native communities. And we did everything from, we did after-school tutoring, we did summer basketball leagues, drug-free dances, Native American culture camps, powwows. We did food closets. We did baby closets, counseling, teen mothers. You name it, we were there. And the problem is that the church and the government's goal was to make our people dependent upon them. And so there's this strong dependency element. And so people who are in mission know that you look at, sort of like you look at immediate needs and then you look at development, right? Well, there was no development plan by the church nor the United States government. And so our question was constantly, how can we meet the needs of our people and at the same time create lack of dependency, create agency, create something that gives our people dignity again. And so in the middle of all this thought and different things we were doing, and I had a dream, and it was of this place. This was 1998, and it was this place where we were, a community, and we were a school, and we're practicing our culture, and we had a farm. It was on a farm, and so after I was pastoring at the time, so after a year, basically, our church and us agreed, hey, go on and pursue this dream. And that's how Elehe came into being. And this is the third and final iteration, I should say. Yes. And we had mishaps along the way. We first had a 50-acre property in Kentucky, and we built it all up. And then we were basically threatened and run off by a group of white nationalists with the 50 caliber machine gun. So we lost everything. Then we came to Oregon, and then we kind of built it back up. We had a little 3.5-acre place in Newberg, Oregon, and then for 7, 8, 9 years? Yeah, and then finally we're able to get this place because the Newberg, we couldn't really do the whole vision, right? So finally now we're practicing. People come here. We have lots of visitors and lots of tours and lots of volunteer days and things like that. But the most effective thing is when people come for an extended weekend. So we have schools from Thursday afternoon till Sunday afternoon, and they change. I mean, and I'm not exactly sure what the secret ingredients are, but they walk away with a different worldview because they've been exposed to alternatives, and then they also connect with the earth while they're here. And it sort of brings them back into this holistic view of reality. And so, and all we do is kind of host them, and Edith and I, and then a Hawaiian friend, Jim Sakura, and then a Lakota woman, Lenore Three Stars. The four of us do the teaching, and we spend a whole lot of time just telling our stories and listening to them and those kinds of things. Yeah.
I think, what you just said, so they're coming together to tell our stories. And one of the things that you write your own story, where you came from, who you come from, in your book. And I think story is important to know who we are. But one of the things that a lot of us are dealing with, especially, population of people that you are working with and being a part of, being a community with, is intergenerational trauma from one generation to the next generation. Can you open up, share a little bit, Edith, your story and how that generational trauma has come into play for you, and what's some of those ways to say, hey, we're going to start to live and move into a different direction, different way for some healing and growth?
My name is Father David, and I'm a Franciscan friar, and every week me and my guests dive into some of the most pressing issues of our time: church and state, immigration, LGBTQ+, economic inequality, anxiety, depression, climate change, and so much more. Join us in these conversations. Friar Time isn't just another podcast, it's where faith meets real life head on. You can find all the links to our podcast channels in your show notes.
I was born and raised on the Wind River Indian Reservation out in Wyoming. And I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. My father was a product of the boarding school system, the Native American boarding school systems that probably you hear, all the time, and or maybe not. So he was taken probably between the ages of 9 and 12, and he was the oldest of 4 children. And the agent said, you either send him or we take all of them. And so my grandparents sent him and spared the other 3. And so he left. He didn't know a stitch of English. And of course, there was a lot of abuse and a lot of things like that happened to him. He came home about the age of 17, and then come to find out that my grandmother, his mother, was dying of cancer. And so he had a year with her. And before he left, she was raising him up to be the spiritual leader of the family. And so teaching him all the plants and all these different traditions and everything that he needed to know to carry the family. And so he came home, all that kind of stuff happened. He got married at the age of 18, lost his mother, started having kids with his first wife, and alcohol. Both of them were very alcoholic. And so all of that happened. And then he met my mother. A couple of years later, my brother and I were born. And so my dad was a very large presence in our home. And but he also had a very loud voice. When he spoke, you like, okay, Dad's talking. But everybody loved him. And as time went on, he quit drinking and, he just did what he could. But I grew up in this very chaotic home. And I think if it wasn't for my mother continuing to pray for me, I probably would have ended up like a lot of my brothers and sisters are today. And which aren't very good. And then I also got into my own dysfunction, drugs, alcohol, things. I went off to college, did the whole college thing. I couldn't wait to leave because I just I had a very poor self-esteem of myself. And I did not want to be on the reservation because it was a very negative thing for me. And it's being very negative being Indian because of everything I lived in. Then I ended up in a rehab program up in New York for well over a year, and then 2 years. And then I came home and went into radiology. And I just kind of resigned myself that I'm never returning back to Wyoming. So, and then eventually things kind of worked out. And then I ended up marrying Randy, getting involved with Randy. A couple of months later, we got married. Then we started our family. But it took a lot for me to say, I'm not going to do this. And then I started really digging into who I am as a Native person. So within that, I did a lot of praying, a lot of watching, looking about the things that were going on around me. We spent a lot of time with a lot of elders in Oklahoma. We were in Oklahoma when we got married. Once I started really digging back into who I was as a Native person, I was able to, start healing. I started wanting to spend more time outside, being with, and it just started. It took some time though. And it wasn't like, oh, I did this, this, and this, and then I was done. I was healed from all this trauma. No, things still creep up every now and then. So it's a constant thing. And being within nature, being able to be out, putting my hands in the dirt or picking berries or whatever we're doing, it brings me back to who I am.
One of the things that happened with Europeans coming into America, the wisdom of Native Americans and the worldview of Native Americans were trying to be pushed aside and pushed out. There was abuse, trauma, like there's horrific things in the past in America. What is that worldview that came in to push out the wisdom that was already in place and there that was operating in a more harmonious way?
So the European worldview has, been formulated over, a long period of time. Basically, I take it back about 3,000 years to Plato. And it operates as the foundational fallacy is this dualism that says that, the ethereal plane, the spiritual, the metaphysical, etc., are more important than they're privileged over the material, like the earth and our bodies and everything. And that, without a long explanation, that basically creeps in. And then that's very much a part of the European worldview is that, we're on top. Because hierarchy comes as a result of that also. We are on top of nature. Men are over women. White people are over brown and black people, etc. We have all of those that stem from that European worldview that was developed over so many years. And then when you come to a place that is basically inhabit of people who love nature and are part of it and are doing that, then, not only is there reason to create myths about them because they're children of the devil and everything else because they're religious, right? It's like, we got all the answers, you have nothing. And so, and then this is a common trope that goes, marches through centuries, the Crusades and everything else, is these people are ignorant savages. They have nothing to teach us. They don't know God. They don't, they have no, and then you add this thing about nature, like, well, nature's, the lower parts of our thought and our world and everything else. So there's plenty of reason. And then the other sort of major, there's two more components to this. One is that this class system that was going on in Europe, and you had no ability to move up in society, right? Unless somehow you could do great deed or marry up or something like that. And so the only thing standing between like free land and this new world, as they called it, are Native Americans, right? And then all of a sudden my family can move up in the world and have their own property and, sort of they can be in charge. And then the other thing is that at the same time of quote unquote discovery, Europe is really looking poor in terms of environmental degradation. So the rivers are all, impure and polluted. Nobody's drinking water. Now they're all drinking beer because the rivers are all polluted. They're fished out. All the bays are fished out. There's pollution everywhere. Disease is pretty rampant. The hardwood trees like oaks are being cut down and made into smelting iron for tools and weapons, making castles and cathedrals and fortresses. And so Europe is a mess at the time. And so this is virtually a Garden of Eden for them, especially on the East Coast where most of the native people were planters and had stationary villages, where they had already had all these, hundreds of thousands and millions maybe of acres of corn planted and squash and beans and, all those kinds of things. And so, there's a little bit of this whole American story about we hacked our way into the wilderness and chopped all the trees down and no, it was already set when they got here. So by and large, and so and all they had to do is just get rid of the one impediment, which is Native Americans. And so, what's the first thing you do? It happens in the wars in the U.S. The first thing you do is you demonize the enemy. You say all the bad things about them and why they're heartless and why they deserve to die. And so then the policies became, from that point on, genocide. And if genocide didn't work, then it was assimilation. And so that's been the case and still is today.
So can you contrast that a little bit of then what would a Native American worldview look like?
Well, we're at a place now where the temptation is for Native people, because of the high rate of assimilation, to take on that dualistic worldview. And so we're lucky we still have traditional communities and others around who still have a holistic worldview, who still understand that we are not just like, we call it mind, body, soul, but we're much more than that. And there's really no such thing as the mind without the body, or the body without the mind, or without the soul. All of that together makes us human beings, right? It just makes it easier for us to categorize it. And so we do all these categories, and that comes. That's one of the, I think, the advantages of a Western worldview is this ability to create all these categories. I'm glad I have a cardiologist and a neurologist and a general practitioner, et cetera, and a pulmonologist. But if any one of them treats me like, if my cardiologist just treats me like I'm a heart, I'm in trouble, right? And that's the way it is with this skewed view of reality. If we're not putting all the pieces back together and working out of a whole, then we're not working in reality. Well, Native America is probably the least affected, in this country at least, by this, parsing reality out. And so we still have this view among us that's a holistic view of everything together. And then when I talk about the community of creation, that's a phrase that I coined to try and say, that includes everything. Sometimes I'll say the whole community of creation, including people. And so we're all part of that together. We all have to learn to live together. We all have to learn to really love and appreciate all parts of creation. And that's the perspective that Native folks have traditionally.
I'm just going to set it up. So what I hear you saying is that now, because of our dualistic worldview, our hierarchical system and our compartmentalization in different facets, that we have separated things that need to actually work together holistically. And because of that, we actually then, so wars, fighting, different subjugation of people, abuse, neglect, all those sorts of things are more prevalent because of a dualistic worldview, because we could separate people out. And I know you talked about the difference, especially a lot of it in spirituality or in belief system, that you could actually then compartmentalize people over beliefs in a European worldview, because we are what we think more than who we are as a holistic human.
Yeah, or what we believe. Yeah.
Or what we believe.
If you're in the faith community, it's your beliefs over everything else.
Yeah. So then, if that's the problem, what is this new path and new way to actually move into a different direction to become more holistic, and have a more holistic worldview, and to live a more harmonious way?
So there's this thing of us versus them, right? Instead of we all. And us versus them is like, especially, prevalent right now in our political system and in our sort of our culture wars and things like that. The thing is that we've allowed these lies of colonialism to make us believe that we're all different, and that that I don't need the earth, or that I don't need a person of this color, or I don't need. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to read a paragraph from another book I wrote just recently called Mission and the Cultural Other. And I think this will shed some light. So I'm going to read this if you don't mind. The myth of a singular culture, in other words, like, oh, we're this, right? The myth of a singular culture has been important in creating systems suited for empire and to promote racist understandings in all the sciences, including anthropology and missiology. The truth is that we all live in many cultures, even when people's lifeway seems similar. That shared system of lifeways and cultural symbols is what anthropologists have called culture. But even within those shared symbols and lifeways, for instance, North American white cultures, anthropologists recognize there are different cultures of poverty, homelessness, wealth, region, ethnicity, education, and so forth. We attempt to further distinguish them from one another by using terms such as class and station and race, etc. People coming from these places share symbols, food, and the like, but they develop not just class differences, but also worldview differences that perceive similar cultures differently. It would be incorrect to say that they share a culture when, in fact, they share only part of those cultures. They, like most everyone, are bicultural, multicultural, or intercultural. In this intersectionality, we all are all parts of many cultures, and much damage has been done through the historic holding up of one culture as a measuring rod to assess all others with presumed objectivity. Intercultural studies take serious and different differences and intersections of all these cultural aspects. So, big long sentence to spread it all out, but basically just to say we're all involved in many cultures now, right? And to say, oh, there's like white culture is superior to whatever, is to not even look at reality. Because like how many different cultures are in white culture? How many different cultures are in native culture? Now, there are some overriding values, and I call that come from that worldview, right? That we have to look and take apart and say, we need to get rid of these and we need to take these on, right? So, and this is our whole point of the book is to say we need these values, right? That are native values. But we have so much more in common as human beings and as people who live on the same planet and everything else. And these differences, the impediment is to say the differences are things that should keep us apart, when in fact the differences are things we should celebrate. We need to know. And if I may, Jesus spent a whole lot of time sitting at the table listening to what it's like to a first century Palestinian prostitute or a first century Palestinian tax gatherer, or et cetera, listening and saying, wow, there's things that I have to learn about this. He didn't know about this stuff until he listened to them, So this whole idea is that we're of so many cultures and so many stuff, and that's a wonderful thing. And we all can appreciate that. We can't just anymore isolate and go, this is my culture.
It makes total sense, and I think it's very helpful for all of us. I even say, even like if I married somebody down the street from me, I'm still in a cross-cultural marriage. I mean, because
exactly, yeah. So I used to say to my students would all be like, so it sounds like you're telling us we all need to invite, and I'd like to. My church is all white. I'd like to, because I taught at seminary, right? And I want to get people of color in. How do I do that? And I'm like, well, let me ask you something about your all-white church. Are they all male? No. Are they all female? No. Are they all Republicans? No. Are they all, poor, or are they all rich? No. So I said, you know what? Start appreciating all the differences in your congregation. And maybe when you can do that well, then you start inviting people of color.
Amen. Edith, what are some of these values that you start to provide for us as this pathway? You got harmony, respect, accountability, history, humor, authenticity, equality, community, balance, and generosity. Can you speak to one of those values for you that is pretty crucial for you in your story?
I guess I would say really hospitality is something that has always been important to me. I learned it later on, but I was always around it. My parents always, no matter what time of day or night, if someone come up to the house, boom, they set them down, they talked with them. My mom made coffee. If we were in the middle of eating, she would make them a plate. Or my dad would say, add more water to the soup, honey. Or he called her mom. Add more water to the soup, Mom. It was just something that my parents did. Both our families did this hospitality thing. I don't think they knew it as the word hospitality, right? It was just something that was built into them, that this is what we have to do. We don't turn away anybody. Maybe that's our problem. We don't turn away anybody. But the thing is that, once you bring someone into your home, you show them love and generosity, and and care for these people, you end up loving these people because they're just human beings like you are. And you would want to be, I would want to be treated the same way as I treated that person. So for me, hospitality is very important for me.
Can you speak a little bit, either of you, into what is the hospitality with a non-dualistic worldview look like that's different from hospitality in a dualistic worldview? For example, I have, friends from other parts of the world where the hospitality that someone with a dualistic worldview would show them was, hey, we're going to take you out and take you to a restaurant. And I think that, for the person that is trying to show the hospitality, that is, hey, we're showing you some status, affluence, this is fancy, this is going to be good. And it's something like, oh, this is how we show hospitality. Is there a difference there between the hospitality within different worldviews?
Yeah. I think you stated part of the difference, right? So the answer's in the question, but we have something, and I understand there's also we have something I call Portland Polite, and I know up in Seattle they have Seattle Polite also, right? And it's like, you want to go, and it was strange for us because we moved from the South, right? And the Southern culture is very different, and it's influenced a lot by Native culture, and so it's sort of like hey, let's get together, okay, let's go out for coffee, right? But someone said you can ask directions. People in Portland will give you directions to anywhere except for their own home, and so people just don't have each other in their homes, and that's really strange for us because when you have someone in your home, you're sharing your life, right? You're sharing your whole self. Whether you got, kids, whether it's clean or not, grandkids, whatever's happening, that's who you are. And that breeds authenticity, right? And so authenticity is also one of those values, besides the generosity that Edith was talking about. So the authenticity is like, to me, and I always talk about the Creator as the most vulnerable being who exists. That's my understanding of who God is. And part of that's part of love is vulnerability, And so if we are vulnerable with people, if we're authentic, that's part of really who God is. And that's probably the most spiritual we can be, is just to be human beings who are open and who are vulnerable. And so the opposite of that then would be like superficiality, and, oh, let's not go to my home, let's go to coffee, or, not that I always want a good cup of coffee, by the way, but, or trying to do it for status, or going, I don't want them in my home, that's not the same thing.
I want to know about the spirituality of humor and what humor does as a value and how that actually impacts our spirituality.
Oh, just let me say something real quick. You go on. I saw this meme on Facebook a friend of mine put up. She's a native friend. She's a Dakota, and she goes, and it's a meme that she reposted, and it said something like, when an Indian is really likes you is when they joke with you and they laugh at you and and all these kind of make fun of you and all these kind of things, right? And an Indian likes you. But if they ignore you, they don't talk to you, they don't make fun of you, they're very polite to you, they don't like you. So, I mean, that's a part of humor with Native people. We laugh at each other, we joke with each other, we tease each other, even when things are hard and tough. If someone doesn't crack a joke, then it's just...
Well, it's part of the balance, right?
Yeah, it's the balance thing.
It's this way of, like, if we just dwell on our problems all the time,
right,
then, we're going to be really, really sad all the time. We have to be able to see, like, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel, maybe a joke will do it, or maybe I'm just feeling sorry for myself, and so we tell a story or a joke that talks about that, or it just reminds us that, oh, yeah, that's right, I'm just a human being, I'm vulnerable. This is what life's about. It's about going through stuff, right? And so it reminds us that we're human, and we're not God. One of the things that Native. Now I'm going to tell a secret on your program here that just between us, okay? All right. So yeah, but this is one of the things Native people say about white people all the time. Why do they take themselves so serious? And it's like, well, because you just got to keep being better and better and better and better. No, we're just all human beings, right? And joking around and self-deprecating humor and teasing each other. Even like the Crow tribe, they have a clan that's called the Teasing Clan. That's their job, is to go around and tease people. So it's a part of Native values because we need that to be human.
Yeah, it's very that's humility. It's like not actually having a right view of yourself, not taking yourself too seriously, not being
humility
serious
is
all the
part
time.
of that humor, right? Humor, humility, humus, the earth. Yeah, kind of all comes together there. Yeah.
That's
Talk then about the right belief versus an experiential spirituality, and how important experience is in this journey and path.
Well, so you're thinking about like for religious people of faith, is that the
Well, yes, but I mean experiential life is it's for everybody, but yes, for people of faith.
So this is again a result of the dualism, but it really comes out of the Enlightenment, right? That reason trumps experience, and so that's just part of what comes out. Where whether it was Hume or Bacon or Descartes or Rousseau or whoever it was in Adam Smith, whatever area it was in, it was just the idea that having experience the facts, right? This age of science, if you will, that the objective and subjective were split, which is natural when you think about the dualism, right? And so now they're saying there's an objective reality and there's a subjective reality, and it's again, who's going to put Humpty Dumpty back together here? No, it's all one reality. But this is where we began to say, like, beliefs are more important than experience. And that bleeds over then into the Reformation and the faith community so much that they just would start killing each other over correct beliefs or not, right? And so, it's a really, really kind of messed up, and I would say even evil kind of worldview, is to say that beliefs are more important than experience, because all of that matters, right? I don't think beliefs matter that much. I think you show me what you believe by what you do, right? And the rest is just all bravado.
I think this is somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago, why is it easier for us to lie to ourselves than it is to tell the truth, to say this is actually the way that the world works? And this is my hypothesis that I thought is that it is because of the way that we have been raised, our worldview, that it's the water that we swim in. It feels like we swim in a lie, at least the culture that I'm around. We swim in a lie that we actually don't recognize how the world really works, which I would call, what is the kingdom of God? Like, what is the way that the Creator has actually ordered the world in the way that should be working? And so how do we start to shed this worldview or this way of thinking and living into a new reality, which actually then embraces the way that the world is rightly ordered and rightly works? Yeah. Because if it's just the water that we swim in, how do I recognize it and start to move into a different direction?
So the word you use, recognize, is really important, because all that long paragraph that I read and talked about all the differences and everything is that we begin to expose ourselves to people with different views, different worldviews. And we begin to say, oh, they see reality different. And what is it about their reality that tells me my reality is part of what I'm doing is a lie? And so, and that's what, basically the decolonization process is to get away from empire is to start just pulling on the threads of the lies. And it's a lot easier. I've seen so many people just, once you start pulling, the whole thing falls apart. And then you're it's painful. Yeah, it's really painful to go, oh man, I lived this many years and I didn't realize this. And but I've had so many people come back to me and just tell me my whole worldview's changed. And thank you for, begin to expose some of this stuff. And so, thank God for the prophets, and thank God for the artists and the poets and the songwriters, and the people who will actually speak truth. And then, so what we have to do is we have to seek out those kinds of peoples, and we have to seek out people from different cultures, especially of those kinds of peoples, that will help us get a hold of those threads and start pulling on them.
That's so good. And Randy, Edith, if you have a hope for your readers, people that would pick up your book, Journey to Elohe, what would your hope be for them?
I guess my hope would be that they just take something from the book, and just like the 10 values that we talk about, and really kind of look at that in their own lives. And how can they apply, even if it's just one of those values, and they just kind of start, like Randy said, pulling those threads, unraveling those threads that can help them in their own journey of life and with the Creator and with themselves, finding out who they are. So, yeah.
And I'd say that the whole point of the book is just what I described a while ago. It's like you're going to hear from people who you can relate to, but have a different worldview and have adopted other values. And then that's going to help you say, where's my life and what do I want to do? And so I'm not worried about the whole, that people talk about deconstruction. Well, what about reconstruction? It's like, people are resilient, they'll figure out how to put their lives back together. But until we expose the lies, we're not ever going to begin to replace them. And so, I think, this book is really more about sharing our journey and those truths. In the first couple chapters kind of lay some things out, lay out the playing field, but it's pretty, when you listen, like you started off by talking about how important story is. When you hear other people's story, you look at your own, you find yourself in that story or outside that story, and you go, that's going to cause me to do what, And so I think if people will just read it, I think those things will naturally happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. I have a couple questions I like to ask at the end. One, so this is for both of you. If you go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I would, honestly, we're talking about our whole person, right? I would say, stay in shape. Don't let yourself get all flabby and overweight, right? Because health, you pay for it later on in life. And so I think that'd be my first advice. Everything else might be about identity. It's okay to be who God made you to be. Don't worry about everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what I would say really is about identity. Because at 21, I didn't know who I was. Get to know myself even better and who I am, that the Creator made me, and in a unique way. So, identity.
Yeah. Any recommendations for us? Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
I teach sometimes for the Center for Action and Contemplation. And, for years I've heard of Richard Rohr, and I know he's got all kinds of books, and he's got all kinds of people who love him and everything. And I thought, I've been teaching there for a year, and I should probably read one of Richard's books, right? So I'm reading The Universal Christ, and oh man, it is lovely. It is just packed full of great stuff. And so I appreciate him so much now after I'm not finished with it, but that's what I'm currently reading.
Well, Randy and Edith, one of the things I just want to say to everybody is I said to my wife last night, and said, I think Journey to Elohe is one of my favorite books I've read this year really easily. I devoured it. I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to immerse myself in it, like wrap myself in this book and your words. And so I love this book. And I've already said, okay, I know some people I'm going to give this book to as gifts. So I'm already thinking about that. So it's a fantastic work. And so I want everybody to go and get it and read your story and these values. I think it's really important to start to recognize, what we've been living with, and then pull on those threads and see where we could live a different way, in a way that is more ordered to what the Creator has actually designed the world to be. And so how can people go and get this book? Is there any other places that you'd like to connect people to? How can they connect with you too?
Yeah. So, of course, the book's on all the major booksellers, and our Fortress Augsburg is Broadleaf is an imprint of them, and so they can go and get the book there. Of course, they can get it from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, or their favorite bookstore, wherever you can get it. But we have a website if people want to know more about us, and that's Eloheh, ELOHEH.org. And if you want more about our farm, it's elohehseeds.com, but .org will take you there. You follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Eloheh Eagle Swings on Instagram. We're around. You put in, my name, and you'll find all kinds of good and bad things there, So I'm kind of notorious and, infamous in some circles. So
You definitely are.
Perfect. Well, Randy and Edith, thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me, hearing a little bit of your story, these values, the worldviews that we hold, the ways that we could be able to sit and hear other people's stories to see the truth of what the Creator has actually ordered the world to be, so that we can start to live with some of these values of harmony and hospitality and authenticity and generosity and so many others that I think would help this world out in a deep way, that we could actually be not just people that lord over people and creation and other things, but we could work with one another and with the earth and with nature, so that we could actually live in a better world, and a world that this was designed for. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Jennifer. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to see more episodes like this, go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron of the show. You can help us produce more episodes so that we can see the body of Christ look more like Jesus. If you become a patron on patreon.com/shiftingculture, you will get early access to episodes. You will get episode guides. You will get bonus shows, hopefully, and more. So go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron. Also, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out and helps us find new listeners to the show. And just go and share this podcast with your friends, your family, your network, people that you think would enjoy it as well. Thank you again for listening to the show. I hope you have a great week.